The subject of this talk is Doctor Who, the reboot, and using the IMDb rating system and a few other pieces of information to determine whether Season 11 is indeed worse than previous 10 seasons. We have harvested our data from the IMDB database a few days ago. At the time of harvesting, the most recent episode had stabilised at a rating of 7.4. So our data is pulled from the IMDb database. They are weighted averages. The IMDb uses Bayesian analysis, which filters out spam votes towards the bottom and the top by putting everything towards the average. We have 157 data points, which is all the main series episodes, all the specials, and the 3 large shorts. And we have assigned episodes to series based not upon their production number, but upon what makes sense. So jumping straight in at the data, we have plotted the average by series against its series number. And as you can see, series 1 through 10 are relatively constant. They're within a standard deviation of each other. But series 11 is indeed lower. So plotting the distribution of the scores for an episode, rounding to the nearest whole number, we can see that Series 11, its distribution is indeed, it looks significantly below the distribution of Series 1 through 10. So if we look at Series 11 as a subpopulation of all episodes, we can see that it occupies basically a tail of the distribution. Because our distributions are approximately normal, we can apply students' t-test, and the probability that Series 11 is as good as Series 1 through 10 is 0.0011%. So there is basically no chance that Series 11 is as good as the previous series, and hence this is an absolutely unassailable level of significance. Season 11 is worse. Another way to approach this is by ranking all the episodes, so placing them in a list according to their score. And if we do that, all of the Season 11 episodes are in the bottom quartile of the distribution, and 5 of the 10 worst episodes of all time are from Season 11. The ratings have generated some controversy, but discussion of the absolute ratings, i.e. how many million people watched it, is completely incorrect because it doesn't adjust for example, the season or the time of day or what day it's transmitted. What we should do is look at the relative rating, i.e. the percentage audience share of a season. Now, Season 11, it has declined over its run. It had a really good start with 45% of people watching the pilot, but by the end, it is down at the same level as Season 10. This indicates that, in fact, it was not a well-received series. So we can have a look at all 11 series, and indeed, Series 11 is the second worst performer of all of them, with only Series 10 being worse. But Series 11 has been heavily skewed by the fact that they got a very large boost in its first few episodes, and by the end of the series, it's at the same audience share as Season 10. So we can make a quick detour into data from Rotten Tomatoes. This is a much less robust data set, and we are going to completely ignore the fresh/rotten ratings because it's a very crude system, but only look at the ratings given by critics or the general public. And whilst Rotten Tomatoes data is more extreme, it shows a very similar trend to the IMDb data. So putting all this together, this confirms that Series 11 was empirically much worse than Series 1 through 10. The reasons are not clear. It may be that there was a poor performance by the actors, it may be poor writing, poor showrunner, it may be both those above, or it may be some kind of bias, an ism. Looking at the actor, Eccleston, Tennant, Smith and Capaldi all have very similar numbers, but Whittaker's are lower. However, this was not the only thing changed with Season 11, because the primary actors and the showrunner, and hence the writers, were changed simultaneously. We can't disambiguate between these two things. Davis and Moffat, very similar in their numbers. Chibnall, much, much lower. So to test for an ism, we can look at the differences between male and female voting patterns. This is data IMDb gives us. So interestingly, females tend to give higher scores than males on average, and it's particularly pronounced when episodes are low scoring. Females tend to be far more charitable than males with bad episodes. So as you can see, females consistently give episodes and the series higher ratings across the board than males. However, for Series 11, women think that it is 24% probable that it's a coincidence that the figures are lower, whereas for men it is much, much, much lower. Both males and females agree that Series 11 was worse than Series 1 through 10. So, looking at the rankings that females assigned the episodes of Series 11, we can see that of the 10, 6 sit in the bottom quartile, and of those, 4 are in fact in the bottom 10 of all time. It Takes You Away and Demons in the Punjab, they sit in the third quartile, so below average. The Woman That Fell to Earth is almost precisely an average episode as far as they're concerned, and Rosa is slightly above average. One other thing to consider is to look at the percentage of the audience that are female to see if there has been a large influx of females watching with a female doctor. As you can see, the percentage of the audience, using IMDb's reviews as a basis, has been declining since around season 6, season 7. Right now, about 18% of people watching Doctor Who in the UK are female. Episodes 1 and 3 are a bit different. They're up at around 23%, which has dragged the average up. But there is no evidence that there has been any entryism, any large increases in the female viewership. However, despite the fact there's been no entryism, no large increase in the female audience share, Series 11 has shown a very large upswing in the differences between the way that males and females vote. To work out why this is, we can look at the distribution of their votes. Now, looking at males first, we see a trimodal distribution. Down at the bottom, there is a group that are given 1s, and up at the top, there is a group that are given 10s exclusively, and in the centre, we have something resembling a normal distribution. Now, these 1s and these 10s are probably due to simple digital voting. People say, I like it, I give it a 10, I dislike it, I give it a 1. And this is common throughout all episodes of Doctor Who. For females, there's a generally similar pattern, but there's far fewer 1s given and far more 10s, whereas the central distribution seems to be in roughly the same place. The reason for these 1s and 10s is non-sophisticated voters who are just saying, I like or I dislike. How this works, if you can imagine there is the normal distribution moving to the left or right, the crude or non-sophisticated voter seem to have a threshold, and when they think it is past that threshold in their 1 to 10 score, they will go to a 1 or a 10. So with males, where they have perhaps dislike this series more than others, we have seen a shift from 10 down to 1. That's simply, I like it, I don't like it. With females, we have seen a similar but opposite trend where we've had 1s going up to 10s. Happens throughout all 11 series, but it's a bit more pronounced here, producing slightly more skewed results. One way of estimating the effect of these non-sophisticated voters is to exclude all the 1s and all the 10s from the votes, and only average 2 through 9. When we do this for male voters, we can see that they gave roughly the same number of 1s and 10s, and so they actually are relatively unbiased. There's very little effect. Whereas we should note that for series 1 through 10, they in fact did show a bias towards the 10 ratings. For female voters, they're in fact in some cases quite heavily biased, especially for the 4 episodes that were not in the bottom quartile. If we remove these 1s and 10s, the difference between voting drops from 1.0 to 0.5, which is about an outlier for what we would normally expect. So this is probably the effect that we're observing. Another way of analysing the data is to look at the modes of the distributions. When we do this for male and female voters, they come out approximately the same, consistent with within a small gap which was seen in previous older series. This supports the theory that the differences in the score between males and females is due to these non-sophisticated voting subpopulations, both male and female, but they are minor. So, in conclusion, Series 11 is statistically significantly worse than Series 1 through 10. All 10 episodes of the series are in the bottom quartile, and 5 of those episodes make it into the bottom 10 of all time. Female viewers disagree on the extent of how much worse it is, but they do agree it is significantly worse. There are some apparent changes in the voting behaviour of some subpopulations, but the biases seem to be minor and cancel each other out. So we can't tell whether the reason the series is worse is due to the actor, which is probably unlikely, or the quality of writing, or both. Thank you.